Yours may not look like this one. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully you have your own take on this and you interpret it how you want to. There's not a whole lot of detail put into him. You can see that he has some basic facial features. There is a texture applied to him. Like if I were to zoom in, you can see how his skin definitely does have some skin leathery look to it. He does have eyes, his nose, mouth, lines, everything. You know, and this took me maybe 2 hours to do, maybe, from taking it from Cinema into ZBrush. And then a couple things that I'm going to go through also is like, you know, the eye here is actually a picture of an eye. You could use that as a picture of an eye, or you can use a texture that you built. This is for my other class. They're doing a full character. So this is my full character. And the character is built everything inside of ZBrush. So in like the next modeling class, we do a full character in ZBrush. So here's this guy and here. Now these eyes are actually painted right inside of ZBrush, whereas this guy, his eyes are actually pictures projected inside of ZBrush as opposed to being painted separately. Okay. And you can see also there's a huge difference in the quality. You're going to be turning in a high-res one, so this is a high-res image. This is a low-res image. Okay, there's a huge difference in the detail. Look at right there, all the skin detail. You can kind of sort of see it. But on the high-res, we can get really close to this and really see a lot of that skin texture on there, and even like the eye itself is really nice. Okay. ZBrush is there. And this. So I'm going to Control O to open my project. I'm going to go find it on the D drive here. There. Head. Number 2. Alright, so this isn't as far as the other one. Maybe use 3. There we go. There's our cat guy. Okay. So this is where we left off with that cat guy last time. So now I want to go through the texturing process of this because it's completely different than everything we've done before. I want to show you this because every software is going to have a different way that they do things, and obviously understanding the core of that is important. Now this we could actually take out of here and bring it into Maya. We could like export this geometry out of here and bring it into Maya or bring it into Cinema and use it as an end product or animate it or whatever. But the goal of this one is that everything's from this point is done inside of ZBrush. So over here on the left are all the materials. So this is they're divided into 2 areas. These are matte capped materials. These are standard materials, and then these are quick picks, which is stuff you've already used before. So those are all the default ones that just, as I go through these and click on them, they'll pop up. Now when I go to one of these, I'm basically picking a base. So before, like when we're in Cinema, we would just create a material and then add color to it and add a texture to it and add whatever to it. In this one, you're picking like a base, like what does it look like? Because this character is not like metallic like this, I wouldn't want to use that. But let's say they had armor on. I could use that as a starting point for their armor. Same thing here. This is just a darker one. This is more of like a diffused one. So they have some skin ones in here that I'm going to use as my starting point. I think like that one should be good. That one. Yeah, that one should be fine. All right, so I'm going to use matte cap skeleton. Okay. Now, when I click on one of these, it looks like it's assigned it to that object. Okay, it hasn't. All it's done is temporarily let me preview what it looks like. I have to actually go and assign that material. So I'm going to go to my subtool, make sure I'm on the head, make sure up here my Z add is turned off, and make sure that my mRGB is on. Okay. The RGB stands for color, like your red, green, blue. The M stands for material, and then the mRGB is both. Okay. Now we also have a RGB intensity, so I want to crank that up. Make sure I'm on mRGB. Make sure I'm on my head layer. Then under my draw, or sorry, document. No, it was draw. Oh no, sorry, color. I'm going to go to fill object. Okay. Now what fill object does is actually takes this color information and assigns it to it. Okay. Now unlike cinema and unlike keyshot, I can't go and edit this material. I'm only editing what my object looks like. Okay. So imagine in this case you have a bunch of buckets of paint, and by me going to fill, I've taken one of the buckets of paint and thrown it onto the character. I can't go back to the bucket and change it and have it change my character. I basically have to change the bucket and then reapply it to the character. Okay. So that's how you have to kind of look at how ZBrush works. ZBrush is also a pixel-based texturing, meaning that we are painting on each pixel or each vertex. So if we start painting on here and we see it's really blocky, it's because we don't have enough divisions. So on my cat, I'm working with 347,000 divisions. I'm going to hit Control D. Oops, I'm not going to Control D. I'm going to hit D to get to my top point. So I have 5 million divisions on this area that I could then paint on. So I've given this a material by doing the color fill. I'm going to switch to RGB, and then I can pick a color. So let's say for this case I'm going to use a darkish red. Okay. You'll see the eyes change color. I haven't changed the eyes material, so whatever color I choose, the eyes are just going to get that material. Okay. So I'm going to hit S to make my brush bigger. I'm going to make this bigger. If I had a tablet, I would be using a tablet, but I'm not going to in this case. And then I just start painting. And what I'm doing here is just laying in the foundation of the character. So right there, the face area is going to be red. Let's say this will be red here too. These will be red up there. And we'll do a little bit of red here and there. Okay, so now let's say on the back of this, I'm going to just give this a little bit of a lighter color. Okay, so I'm just blending these two colors in together. There we go. All right, so now that looks pretty horrible because I have two flat colors. I want to give this some depth. So now what I can do is start to sample colors. So I'm going to drag this into this middle area, and you can see by my little color picker that it's actually picking up different values. So if I go here to kind of the middle, I'll pick up some of these different values. Now if I start painting, it's going to basically overwrite any color that was there because there's no blending happening. So I need to take this RGB intensity down, and I also need to go to my alpha here and give this some sort of color, some sort of texture. If I paint with the flat brush, it's going to be just like one flat color. But if I find one of these, like this one I used a lot, if I use this one, I'm going to get an actual like brush texture on here, which will make it feel a little bit more natural. If you look at the texture here in that area, it feels a little bit more softer and natural because I'm using something that's not uniformly one size. So now I can start to paint inside these areas to give my character a bit more detail to him. Okay, and I'm going through both sides because I want to blend these colors together to create that look of that transition. Now I may want to actually have a harder transition there, but for now I'm just kind of blending these in. Okay, now when I get to a certain point, I'm going to do a color pick again, grab it somewhere in there, and then start blending more colors. And what you'll see is this is a really easy way to create a color that looks pretty realistic. It's not going to be like a flat color. No one's skin is like a flat beige or any color. There's always some detail to it. There we go. Okay, so you see how I went from that really bright, ugly red to this kind of thing. Oops, forget about that. And then I can go in with some darker areas. So let's say like the eye area. Maybe I want to have this be a bit darker. Leave that low. And I'm just adding in just a little bit of darkness here under the eyes. Maybe a little bit in the nose area. Right? Shrink my brush down, give this a little bit of color. Same thing in the lip area. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Maybe in the ears too. Now I'm still doing with symmetry. I haven't turned my symmetry off. I'm still using my symmetry on both sides, so it's just making the process a bit quicker. Now you could also use your smooth. So if you find that you've gone maybe a little bit too much on a color and you don't want to overwrite it, you just want to blend the colors together, you can still hold shift and smooth the colors out, but be aware that I've just switched this to smooth, which then changed my Z add back on, which means I'm going to be sculpting. So I have to make sure that I turn that Z add off. And so now as I click and drag, I'm only smoothing out the colors. I'm not smoothing out the geometry. Okay. I could also hold shift and go shift D, get to a smaller number here, and then smooth out some of those colors, and then hit D again to get back up. Sometimes you get some weird artifacts when you do that. Just gotta be careful with it. Like you can see here, I got some weird chunky information that I have to then blend out. I'm just going to be doing this and then painting that in. You'll find it's much easier just to sample a color in that area and then just paint it out, as opposed to trying to smooth out in some of those spots. There we go. All right. I really don't like this red color at all. Add a little bit of yellow here, and then I'm going to sample. And you can think of this like literally just like painting. Like if you're going to paint a picture, you don't go full blown like I'm going to grab red and put red in this area. Usually you grab red and put a dot there, and then you mix the other colors with it to help blend in that spot. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm adding a color in a little area and then sampling and then blending it in. All right, this is like the weirdest dude ever. So all right, let's pretend that that's good enough for the skin. That's all I did on the skin here, is I just did that exact thing. I picked a base color, went through and tweaked a bunch of the colors, just kind of painting in browns and tans, and a little bit of green here and there, and some yellows. And that's how I got his skin to look like that. Now there is some other stuff. Like if I go to here, this is where all the material stuff resides. There is no way to get back to that original material. That material is gone, okay? If I click on this and try to change it, it won't go back to it. I have to pick something else and then go from there. It's one of the horrible things about ZBrush, but it is what it is. I'm going to go to the modifiers here. And inside this, I can play with some of the settings to enhance my object. So right now I'm not seeing a whole lot of the skin material, like the skin detail I added. So I can go to cavity detection and pull this up. And if I crank this up higher, I should be able to see it. I may have to play with this transition a little bit. Come on. Oops. Yeah, I may not have had even enough of that. There we go. I can also play with this intensity, A and B, to help that pull out too. So as I went with this A, you can see it does that. It's like darkening it here, and then this way it's lightening it. And then the same thing with the B. One way is going to lighten it, and one way is going to darken it. And you don't have to know what any of these actually do. It's just a matter of going through and just kind of like, what does this slider do? What does this one do? And then you figure out what looks best on your character. Most of these you don't have to play with. That's like a little bit too much in the skin stuff. That should be good there. So a little bit of skin detail on it. All right, so now let's say I want to do the eyes. So I'm going to go grab the eye, and I'm going to go to my material, and I'm going to pick a base material for it, just like I did before. So in this case, I'm going to pick, let's say that one, or that one's cool. Okay. He's tired. This default color is the color of the eye, so I'm going to switch this to like white. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to color. I'm going to say fill. Oh, make sure I'm on mRGB first. Make sure this is all the way up. There we go. And then say color, say fill. So now this eye has it. The other eye does not. Now a way you can kind of tell is if you look at the icons there, there's a little brush right here. This one has a brush. This one has a brush. This one does not have a brush. Okay? So basically there's no material on it. If I click the brush off, the texture goes away. and we're back to our default texture.
Alien baby.
Okay, so now I can go in here and paint the texture for this eye. So I can say I'm done with the mRGB. I'm going to go to RGB. I'm painting in white, and this is what I get. Now this one, even though I'm painting in white, you'll see that it's not actually painting white. It's still this like gray. It's getting the material for this one from this texture down here. It actually has this like reflective material on top of it that does that. So if I were to click on this and turn that off, then it goes to black, and then, come on. You should be able to be painted. RGB 1, yes. There we go. I had to take this opacity down, and then I could paint it. Okay. All right, so then I could, let's say, switch colors and paint it in black or whatever, okay? All right, so I'm going to start off with a base color of, let's say, white, and then I'm going to paint in a iris and a pupil. So I'm going to go to whatever color I want my iris to be, which is the colored part of your eye. And I'm just going to paint like this. Okay, so it's pretty, but it's at 100% right now, so that's fine. I'm going to knock this down a bit. I'm going to pick a different color, like a darker color. Shrink my brush some. Shrink my brush some more. And I'm just kind of like outlining what I want this eye to look like. And then I can switch to, let's say, black. Make this a little bit bigger and paint it. Now you'll notice that as I'm painting this eye, it's coming up really grainy, right? The eye's divisions only have 8,000 points on them. So that's why it's coming up so grainy. That's why I've lost all the detail. So if I hit Control D on this, you'll see that it doesn't like add to it. Like it's added divisions to it, but it didn't fix my texture. Because I've added divisions, I basically have to go back and repaint the texture for that. So if I go back to my white and overwrite this, and then I go back to my green, pull this up, you'll see I get a lot more detail in there because I've added so much more divisions. Switch this, we'll lower that. And then we'll switch this to black, shrink this. There we go. All right, so very quickly we'll be able to paint this eye inside here. Now there's another way that we can do this, which is texture projection. Basically we take a texture and we paint the texture right onto it, kind of like clone stamping. So I'm going to go to the other eye and do that. I'm going to go to a material. I'm going to pick this material, sure. I'm going to say switch colors. There we go. And then fill in that. Now if you don't have this RGB set to 100, what it does is it only fills it whatever the value is. So if you set it to 10, it'll fill it 10%, which it could look odd, right? So now I'm going to go to RGB. I'm going to go to Texture tab, and I'm going to load in a texture. So I click on Import, and I find this eye picture that I have right there. So here's this eye. I'm going to say add this to Spotlight. Where are you at? Right there. Okay. So Spotlight is this gear thing that pops up, and basically it allows me to paint my texture right on here. So I need to zoom in on the eye. There we go. I hit Z so I can zoom out. There we go. Add Z again. Okay. So there's scaling right here, so I can scale the picture up or down. I can move the picture just by simply clicking and dragging on it. When I want to paint, I hit Z, and then I'm painting that texture right onto that surface. So you can't see it happening, but as I paint, it's actually going right through it. If I hit Shift Z, it turns that off, and then you can see there is that texture right on top of it. Now again, it's super grainy because I didn't add divisions to this eye, I added to the other one. So I hit Control D a couple times, I go to this, I repaint the texture on there. There we go. So now it's a bit crystal clear. Now the downside of this is that I'm locked into whatever eye picture I'm bringing in. So if that eye picture is, you know, small pupil and big iris, then I've kind of like lost that. I keep saying iris. It's not the iris, right? It's a sclera? No, I can't think of it. Anyway, so I'm locked into that. So I have to make sure that all this stuff fits what I want. Now I could shrink it down like this, let's say, and then paint this area here, and then paint the white that's out there. You know, and I'll get basically that eye right there. Then I could switch to just a basic white brush. Oops, a smaller white brush. There we go. Maybe I'll just eyedrop, no pun intended, right there. That area. Someone got the joke. Oops. There we go. So I could kind of fudge it just by doing something like that, and that could work too. But again, I'm kind of locked into that specific shape. I could bring the picture into Photoshop, I could tweak it from there, make it red, green, blue, whatever, and then bring it back in here, make the pupil bigger or smaller, whatever. So that's another way I could do it. Now, whichever way I choose to do this, let's say I like this eye on the right better. Yeah, just ignore that. Just so you can see why it's doing that. If I turn the eyeball off, you can see there's actually like other stuff happening there. If I like this eye the best, I could just turn this eye off, duplicate that eye, and then just do a deformation, mirror. Oops. I have to go to geometry first and delete all those lower level stuff. There we go. And then go to deformation, and then go to mirror, and now I'll have the eye on both sides. Okay. Because this is not linking an actual texture, we're actually like taking the pixels from this and painting it onto the vertices of the other one. There's no texture to update. So there's no linking here that's actually like baked into the surface, locked into the surface. So I can't go into Photoshop and change the color and expect it to update. It won't do that. It's all like locked into this specific model. Oops. So let's say that this is good now and I've model this character perfectly. It's happening to his ear right there. We'll just ignore that. All right. And so now what I want to do is I want to do a rendering. Now again, this is a weird program in how it does its rendering stuff. Under my document size is 1267 by 906. So that original image I showed you, the smaller one, that's the size that he was. So I want these, because we're doing a head, we're going to be doing 2400 pixels wide, 3000 pixels tall. Is that what I said? Nope, the other way. That's my guy. 2400 pixels wide, yep, 3000 tall is right. Okay, so I'm going to go to Document, turn proportions off, 2400 wide, 3000 tall, and say resize. Now when I say resize this, remember when I said that originally ZBrush was a 2D painting program. So imagine you went into Photoshop and you painted something and then you resized it, it's going to do that. Okay, so it's going to distort it. But it's cool because all we have to do is go to Document, Color Clear, there it is, drag our guy out again, hit T, and now we're back to where we were, okay? Now this area is not 2400 by 3000 pixels, okay? It's a weird thing of how it does it, but that's not the render size. If I render this right now, his head would be like this big, and then this big canvas would be just blank. So I need to go over here to anti-aliased half size, and this gets me closer to where it would be, and then I can zoom in. Hey, what happened to his other eye? It's going to be probably about this big, where his top of his ears are cut off and the bottom is cut off too. Unfortunately, this is kind of like we have to play with it and see how we can line it up to get the best item. Now, if you're unsure about it, you can kind of go a little bit further back and then you'll be fine. Also, I can turn on perspective so that the character actually has some perspective to him instead of being completely flat. This is like all the features are perfectly on the same plane. Now we have some perspective. So that's cool there. Oops. That's better right where it's at. Okay. So now I'm going to render. So I'm going to go to my render menu and click on this little swatch here, and that loads it over here so I can get to it a little bit easier. Now there's no lights in the scene, so if I were to hit render right now, it would render it pretty much just like we're seeing it. Shift R, which isn't too unfamiliar from cinema, we'll render him out, and we wait. There he is. Okay, so the only thing that's really changed is he has this shadow. That's the only thing that's really changed. So I'm going to go over here to the render properties, and I'm going to turn some things on. So I want to turn on ambient occlusion. I want to turn on wax preview. I want to turn on subsurface scattering. And I think that's it. Depth Q, we'll turn on 2 just for fun. All right, that should be good there. I'm going to also go down to my shadows. And 12 rays should be good. Resolution, blur, that all should be good there. Anti-aliasing should be good. All right, so I turned on some settings, and right now we're not going to get a huge difference. But I am going to go into my wax modifiers for my material and crank this up. So what this should do is it should take my character and make them feel like there's a little bit more substance to their skin. So like your skin has a subsurface scattering. Light goes into the skin, it kind of bounces around a little bit, and some of it escapes. So that's what we should be seeing on this character right now with this wax modifier. I'm going to also add some lights to the scene. So I'm going to go under light. And because we're using matte cap, I have to go to the light cap lights. I'm going to say new light, and I'm going to move this light around like that. And then I'll add a bit more strength to this. Maybe move this over here. Okay, and then I'm going to add another light to the scene. And maybe make this a little bit bigger. Then add another light to the scene. Pull that down here. Okay, so I'm going to use that. So I'm going to hit Shift R again. And what should happen is it's going to take a little bit longer to render. We're dealing with a bigger render size. We have actual lights in the scene. I believe shadows are turned on. And it's also rendering out some of that other stuff. So like our wax modifier, it's going to render that out so that we'll be able to see it. And we'll be able to tweak these things. So the way that this character, you can see here how there's a little bit of, it's harder to see, I think, in the projector because it's so dark, but there's a little bit of glowiness that's happening right there. But the way that he looks the way he looks is because I've used a bunch of different renderings outside of ZBrush to put it together, okay? So I'm going to go and tweak my lighting real quick. Back to my light. Back to my shadows. Shadow strength is here. And I'm going to go over here to my render shadows. Nope, not preview shadows. Here, shadow. I'm going to take the blur up a little bit more. That blur is a little bit too strong. So I'm going to hit Shift R. Okay, you could also hit this little BPR button here or right there. Either one of those would also render this out. And we are losing a little bit of light on the eyes. I'm not sure if it's like hitting it weird or what's going on with that, but I may have to add another light just so we can see the eyes better. Shadow really didn't do anything. Let's go back to our lights. There's a light that's up here too. This is a different light. I'm just going to add another light inside that. And then this light's here. Exposure, intensity, horizon, placement, light shadow. 100 rays, that's right. Oops, not that. I'm just taking down their shadow strength a bit. All right, hit Shift R again, so then it's going to go through and render the stuff out. And then it's not actually saving anything when we do this. What it's doing is it's rendering out the stuff and kind of saving it inside the program. Over here under Render Pass, these are all the different things I've turned on that I want to extract out of this. Now I did turn on an extra light, so I think that's killing some of the stuff that I wanted to have. But we'll see if it does it again. Nope, it's there. Okay, so let's say that this is cool. I probably want to do a little bit more with the eyes, but let's just pretend that this is good. I'd basically want to add more light to the scene and kind of tweak the lights to get them more in front so we're seeing them. Basically, I have a light over here, a light up here, and a light down there, so it's causing the eyes to basically be blanked out. But you can see how the skin feels like an actual surface as opposed to just like a flat coloring. It looks like there's actually like shading and I guess volume to the character. So I'm going to go to here and you just click on these and then you can save them. So I'm going to go to my work head. I usually make a new folder called renderings. And then you just hit save. So I'm going to go to each one of these and just hit enter to save it. Okay. Now it says floor. Floor is not one of those things because I didn't turn the floor on right here. But had I turned the floor on, I would get shadows for the floor that I could also use inside of here. That's how this guy has a shadow right here on the floor because I had him standing on the floor. The head doesn't really make sense to have a shadow. So I'm going to go to this new folder. I'm going to go to Sarcona Head, Rendering. Let me just close these guys here. And I'm just going to open up my render first. There he is. And you can see the framing too. If the framing wasn't good, now is the time to go back into ZBrush and fix the framing. I want to have a little bit of room around the sides so that I could put a little vignette around it. So now I'm going to grab all these other layers, or all these other files, and just drag it right into the same document. That's the easiest way to do it. Then you just hit enter a bunch of times. Okay. So I first want to cut him out of the background. So I'm going to double click the background and hit OK. And you'll see that I have one of my renders was a mask. There we go. So if I click on this mask, hit Control A to copy, to select everything, Control C to copy it. Then I go to this guy and I make a layer mask. I Alt click on the layer mask and then Control V to paste it in there. What happens is it takes that mask and applies it to that layer, so now it's a mask. So now I have a background there, so that it's pretty dark on the screen. Let me just add a curve real quick, just so we can see this a little bit up there. It's good enough. There we go. Okay, so he's like really blown out on my laptop. But now we have a background, so that if I wanted to, which I do, I could add a color back here, and now his head is sitting on this color, which makes him pop out a little bit more than just having it on the black, ugly background. So now I want to take my ambient occlusion, which is right here. And the ambient occlusion for this one is very subtle. It's like right there and here. On my other guy, there's a bit more ambient occlusion, but it's all per file. There it is. Because I have the curves on, we're not seeing the whole thing. So I'm going to take this ambient occlusion, and I'm just going to multiply it times that. Okay? So what it does is it's going to darken up some of these areas here. So the area where the nose was, it's just going to give it a little bit more depth in that area. I can also do a levels. Alt click that and tighten this up. And if I do a levels on the ambient occlusion, what it does is it really adds some depth to it. So you can see how it kind of pulls in some of that area a little bit more, makes the nose feel a little bit darker in here, it feels this a little bit darker. Now I don't want to darken the background. You'll see that this is, in this case it's not really darkening the background too much. It will in a second. Mask, shadow. Okay, so here's my shadow. And we already have basically a shadow there. But in case you wanted to edit it, we have a mask so we can edit the shadow if I want to color it or whatever. So I don't really need that for this. I do have this one, which is a nice pass. So this is going to give me some lighting information so I can give kind of like a halo to my character to help them pop out and blend in with, pop out / blend in with the background. So I'm going to go here and just set this to an overlay. Not an overlay. A screen. There we go. So I'm going to set that to screen, and you can see how we get this nice little like halo around the character. Then I can take the opacity down some just to help soften it. Alright, so now here we lost our background color. Our background used to be that greeny color, now it's gone. So what I can do is if I alt-click between this layer that has a background, or has the cutout, and I alt-click all of these, what it's going to do is it's going to... Go back to screen. What did I do? What did I do? Oh. This levels is no longer needed or working because it's just doing too much stuff. Let's get rid of that. There we go. Okay. It was darkening it. So now we have this nice little rim light for our character, which is pretty sweet. Now you can take that and you could add masks to this. And you can paint black on the mask if you wanted to limit where that mask is happening. So if I only wanted the rim light to be like on one side of this, you see how easy that is to do now without having to repaint all that stuff in there. I'm basically creating a nice little rim light on the side of that. Okay, so that can really add a lot to your character just by having that subsurface scattering thing in there. So then I'm going to go to my background here, and I'm just going to add I'm going to take this background color, and I'm going to darken it like crazy. Like that. Oops, wrong way. And I'm just going to hit these corners. Now if we look at this real quick, you're going to see some banding happening. I think you can see it, yeah. You see the banding that's happening there? Anytime you work with Photoshop and you work with gradients and you work at 8-bit images, you're going to get banding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my mode here and switch this to 32-bit. And then say do not merge. Do not rasterize. Okay. There we go. So now what this does is... Hey, I want that. It took this off, so I have to set this back to linear dodge. That's good there, that's good here. Okay. So now I can go back to this layer, and I could repaint it real quick. Just a darker color, not that light. And what we should see is that the banding is not going to be as noticeable. I may want to just grab everything and delete it first, and then add this in there. There we go. There we go. So on my screen it's still showing it, but actually it wouldn't print with that banding like that. Okay, so here's him like this. Then I can go and add a, let's say, lighter color. Whoa, that's way too much. I'll just set that to 1. And take the opacity down. There we go. Alright, so now I have this cool little head done. Okay? So that's all you have to really do inside of Photoshop is I've done the AO to darken up some of those areas. I've done the subsurface scattering to add this little rim light to it. And then I've added a nice little vignetted area in the back. Okay? So you're going to save this as whatever your name is. CreatureHead. Okay? So I want 2 files. One of them is going to be the PSD that has the layers, everything like this. And then one will be a flattened out version. So once this is done, I'll save it as a TIFF with no layers to it. That way, very quickly, I can open it up and show show, print, whatever I need to do. But then I can also dig into it. So I'm just going to save this again as a TIFF, no layers, save. Okay. All right, that one went a lot quicker. Now, just as a bonus bit, let's say that you wanted to 3D print this guy out. And let's say you wanted to put him on your desk. Right now, he would not print good on my desk because he has this like clumpy area on the bottom. So that area needs to be completely flattened in order for this to work. So what I'm going to do is save this guy as 301. Sure. Yep. The colors don't matter when you 3D print, so that is irrelevant. I'm going to take all of these layers here and flatten them out. So I'm going to go to Merge and say Merge Visible. So that should take all my layers and put them together. If not, I'll say Merge Down. And it's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. I'll hit it again, I'll hit it again. There we go. Okay, so now everything is in one layer. Just for speed, I'm going to turn that off and just turn my regular material back on. There we go. So what I need to do now is I need to cut this bottom piece so that that lays flat, okay? So I'm going to go to Geometry. I'm going to go to Dynamesh, which is right here. I'm going to set this number to like 2048 and then say Dynamesh. And then what this should do, okay, is not destroy my geometry, which it didn't. It's thinking though. What it should do is take all of my geometry that I just combined and make it into one solid piece of geometry. Okay, like the eyes are not separated anymore from the head. They're actually like part of it. So if before I had my eye cavity was like this and then my eyeball was like that, well now it's removing this and my eye just goes like this into the eye shape. So there's nothing like actually on the inside of it. That's what Dynamesh should be doing. And then once I have that, then I can go through and cut the bottom off pretty simply. It's really tugging now. And when you turn these in, I want your ZBrush file and I want your 2 pictures. Okay, I don't need any of the other cinema stuff. Just your ZBrush and your 2 pictures. Okay. And I can close that. That might free up some room. If ZBrush ever says this, we wait. ZBrush rarely ever crashes. Rarely. Let's say it never crashes, rarely crashes. Especially if you go to 10 billion divisions. Well, this is 6 million. I think there's a limit. I forget what it is, but 6 million divisions is, you know, a lot of divisions. And then all the skin texture I used on this character and all the other ones, while we're waiting. Head rendering. So like the skin texture on this one is just the default lines one, like the hatchwork that's inside of ZBrush. The one I used on 2520, that one here. The one I used on this one were ones that I downloaded from Pixelogic's website. And so these have a little bit more design to them. And you can see even on here I used the Damien standard brush and added this cut line in his head. And then I used my paintbrush and added some red in there and some black in there, and I bumped up the sides of it a bit and smoothed that out. I'm not sure why these are that color. But you can see, same thing, here's all my layers here that I used. And the cool thing is that once you have this thing set up, then you could just change really any of the colors. right? So now the background's blue, it's green, it's really saturated, it's really dark. Alright, so I think that's good. Yep, it's done. See, it didn't crash. Okay, so now this is all one big piece of geometry.